Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Cheyenne Malone, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hi everyone, I'm Cheyenne Malone. You are watching yet another edition of The Small Business Show. Strategic negotiation tactics are pivotal for successfully closing business deals. We know this, right? And today we are pleased to welcome back keynote speaker, former undercover police officer and federal prosecuting attorney, Pamela Barnum. Welcome. I see your background and I've read up on you and it's impressive, right? You've been in several different positions, successful at all. And I just have to ask you, the transition from undercover police officer and federal prosecutor to now keynote speaker and just delivering, different pitches to people and helping them be better people as a whole.
Well, thank you so much for having me and inviting me. I'm excited about our conversation today. And I didn't anticipate any of the changes. When I worked undercover drug enforcement and transitioned into being a prosecutor, that wasn't in my future until I found out I was starting a family. And of course, being a mom, working undercover, not a great career choice, difficult to manage. So prosecuting was great. And then of course, you're out with friends who work in different businesses, different sectors, and they'd ask about some stories and we would talk about a few things. Then I was asked to speak to some of their staff, and one thing led to another. And I have to say, when I realized that you can really control your own schedule, and the private sector versus the public sector can be a little bit more family friendly, I made the transition and I haven't looked back.
I mean, being a mom will do it to you, right?
You know it. You definitely know it.
I get it. Yes, because you still want to do something, and you're great at whatever it seems like you put your mind to. So in strategic negotiations, how do you identify sources of leverage? Break that down for us.
Well, I think I bring my background into that. And the first thing is really gathering so much information, because the more we have, the bigger our advantage. So, when I was working with drug dealers, we did a lot of background checks. We check with informants, we get tips, et cetera. Our investigators put everything together. Clearly in legal practice, same thing. And really exactly the same with the corporate clients and people that are running businesses or negotiating even in sales, finding out what the other person needs, their preferences, their limitations, really taking that deep dive and then flipping it over and comparing it to what you have, because they may have increased resources. So having more money means you're going to have to present them maybe a more enticing offer, or if they have a lot more time than you do, they might be able to wait out a deadline. So having that understanding is critically important. And I think more than anything, in every career, my careers, your careers, self-awareness is the biggest advantage we can have. Understanding what our limitations are, assessing what the resources are that we have, and we can really leverage that and conversely, know when it's time to walk away.
And when it comes to businesses too, like how are they able to leverage their strengths effectively? What do you recommend?
Well, I think remembering that it's just not about agreement. So we want to ensure that we can implement things, especially in a business. We get the consent, but we also need to be able to execute on that. And finding out motivations is a really big pivotal moment, I think. So I call it the motivation trifecta. And I learned it from a drug dealer. So do you mind if I share it with you? Because I haven't been able to prove it wrong yet.
When you lead with, I learned it from a drug dealer, of course I want to know.
Well, I was in a taxi being driven by a person who was also dealing drugs, and that was their cover, this taxi story. So they had a business, a legitimate business, and then of course they had their illegal business. And this dealer told me one night as we're driving down a country road that there are only 3 reasons people will ever do anything. And, we're, 20 plus years beyond that, and I haven't been able to prove it wrong. And the first is money. And clearly we know, we see in the news, I'm certain you report on it, that people will do a lot of things for money, good and bad, in business. The next is really love or emotion, lust, whatever you want to call it. That comes into play. People will make decisions, sometimes very bad decisions, because they really like someone or they have that emotional attachment, or even to their business, they have an emotional attachment, a love. And the third overarching motive that really overshadows the first two is respect. And when we feel respected, then we are much more willing, where we build stronger rapport, trust is more easily established. Think about a time when you have felt a lack of respect and how you respond to that. The same happens at the negotiations table. When you walk in, your reputation precedes you. So if it's one of a respectful person, professional, that's already in the room. And then how you live up to that, I think, is critically important. So understanding, number one, your motivator, so that self-awareness piece, but really taking a look at the background information you have or reputation of the other person you're negotiating with, figuring out what their motive is. Anytime we know motive, we are so much better. We're better at detecting deception. There's a whole thing around that. We are better at building rapport and connection. So that's where I would hang my hat on that trifecta.
How can businesses counter negotiation tactics employed by the other party?
So I think, decoding in real time is critical. So often we'll walk into a negotiation and we have this background information. Maybe we've prepared a script. We have our BATNA, our best alternative to negotiated agreement. We have all of these things. But if we are not really taking a close look at the nonverbal cues and understanding where they are and who they are in that negotiation, I think we miss out on some things. So I love acronyms, my former careers. So I came up with this acronym DOPE. DOPE. So understanding where they are. And the D is around dominators, people who come in and dominate. We've all dealt with or negotiated with that type of person. They're very assertive. So a way to negotiate with them and counteract is to use silence, because sometimes they don't know how to respond to that. Silence is really important. There's a lot of research around silence. And what the studies tell us is that 4 seconds goes by, people start to feel uncomfortable. So we can use that to our advantage. And the O in DOPE is for the observer, or someone who analyzes everything. They're really diligent. They want to get it right. They're rarely going to show emotion, and they can be skeptical. So again, not asking a lot of questions, because they can use that against you. So really being prepared, over prepared in some ways, for the person who is the observer. And then the P in DOPE is for pacifier, and there's someone who really wants to accommodate. They're looking for peace. They're easily distractible. So as long as you're talking to them, as long as you're communicating, they're really happy, they're likable. You can use deadlines to your advantage with those people, the accommodators and the pacifiers. And then the E is for eager. So if you find out which motive they are in the trifecta, you can use that to your advantage. They're eager to get this done. Could be for one of many reasons, but if you can narrow it down into that trifecta, oftentimes you'll be able to get more information and really use that to your advantage.
I like that. I feel like you can apply this to like everyday life too.
DOPE. You can use the acronym for sure.
What are common challenges that you see in managing negotiation terms generally?
Price, timelines, supply chain, all of those things really come into play, and they can be challenges that can be difficult to get past. So wanting to understand where they are, there's as many different challenges during negotiations as there are people, right? They bring all of these different things to the table. When I was negotiating with drug dealers, oftentimes reputation, or they didn't have choices. They, depending on where they are in the hierarchy, and the same in business, oftentimes, they have a very finite amount of time or resources that they can put into it. So again, getting back and managing those terms come down to preparation, understanding their motivation, and the bottom line that you can use to win more for your side of it.
Any final thoughts for us, Pamela?
Well, I think, really understanding and remembering where you are in the negotiation process and concentrating on your strengths. Oftentimes we spend so much time focusing on the other person. That's what we've talked about. But if we can use our strengths we have more information, maybe we have better connections, maybe we have better resources, steering the conversation toward that will oftentimes increase our side of the negotiations and allow us to have maybe more of a win-win scenario.
Well said. Pamela Barnum, keynote speaker, former undercover police officer, and federal prosecuting attorney. Love what insight you provided for us today. I think a lot of people get a lot out of it. Thank all of you for watching the Small Business Show, exclusively right here on ASBN.com, and now streaming on Roku, Fire TV, and Apple TV. Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of The Small Business Show with Cheyenne Malone, exclusively on ASBN.com.